Hey South Hills, something you're going to notice today is that there's going to be a different campus pastor at your campus. You're a part of a South Hills family, which is one church in many locations. And when I allow the campus pastors to rotate and move around, that gives all of our church a different experience. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention today, this month is actually considered Pastor Appreciation Month. You may not know this, but ministry is becoming more and more difficult every year. This year alone, 42% of pastors have walked away from full-time ministry roles. And one thing that I know for sure is we need pastors to lead local churches. Now, I understand that pastors are constantly diving deep into God's Word and trying to figure out ways to interpret God's Scripture, but I also want you to understand that they're human. They have a human heart just like you. And if you can help me with appreciating our pastors and letting them know the difference they are making in your life, the difference they are making in our community, whether it's writing them a thank you card, whether it's sending them a positive email, whether it's taking them out to dinner or giving them a gift card so they can take their family out to dinner, those things just go such a long way. And I just want to make sure you understand this is a difficult role, but your appreciation and your words of encouragement can be motivating to them. So thank you in advance for going above and beyond, make sure that they are loved and valued, that they understand that the endless hours that they put in every single week to serve you and to serve the community is not going unnoticed and is not going unappreciated.
South Hills Burbank, it is Campus Pastor Shuffle Week. We do this every single year, and you guys are in for a treat. You guys get to hear from one of my favorite communicators and people to learn from, Adam Smith, our Corona campus pastor. Can we get up on our feet and give Adam an incredible South Hills Burbank welcome as he comes to continue family life?
Thank you so much. Thank you for that forced ovation. I appreciate that. Like, who is this? What's happening? I'm so grateful that I get to be here with you guys today. And part of it is just because I have so much love and appreciation for your campus pastor. He's just an incredible guy. And I get to be a part of the interview process to find the new campus pastor for this campus. And from the first moment I met him, I think I was like 2 minutes into the Zoom interview, and I was texting Moses on the side. I'm like, why haven't we already hired this guy? He is amazing. And he just has such a big heart and such a genuine love for you guys, and such a genuine love for Jesus. And every time I talk to him, he's always bragging about the fact that he gets to live in Burbank and be a part of your lives. And so I hope you guys love him half as much as he loves you. And this is a great month to show it because it is Pastor Appreciation Month. And he said if you had any big cash gifts or anything, you just give those to me today, and I will make sure that he gets them. You don't need to follow up with him or anything like that. I'll make sure that it happens. Just use the trust policy there. Well, today we're going to dive into part 4 of our series, and I want to encourage you to take some notes, write down some things that jump out at you, stand out at you, or maybe type some notes into your phone, take a picture of the slides, whatever you want to do, because I really do believe that there's something in here that will help you live life better and run your relationships on a higher level. And there's going to be something that you're not going to want to forget. You're like, man, I want to share that. I want to reiterate that to my family. I want to get a lower back tattoo of that idea. Whatever you want to do is fine, but you'll have it written, and so you'll be able to go into it. I know you guys don't know me, and so I brought a picture of my family so that you guys could get a glimpse of the people that I come from. This is my family. This is actually from our family photos last year. We haven't taken ones this year, probably because my wife is somewhat scarred from the family photo shoot this year. And of course, naturally, it's out in the middle of the woods because that's what you have to do. I don't know when we all decided, like, we got to go to the woods and do it. which feels creepy every year, right? Every year we show up with a photographer we don't know, and they're like, yeah, just come out here in the woods where there's no cell service and no one knows. You didn't tell anyone you were here, right? And you're always out there, and every time they're like, this is the spot, and I'm like, somebody got killed here. Someone died here already, and my wife loves it. She loves the spots every year. She's just like, this is great, you know? If they didn't do some sort of a reenactment from a crime documentary there, she doesn't want that family photo, okay? That's how she rolls. And so we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we're there, and none of my kids wanted to do this photo shoot. They were all opposed to it. I take that back. Tegan was really into it, my daughter. She is 14 now, and she is the one on the right. In case you're wondering which one's my wife, it's the other adult. And then Tegan is, she's right here on the right. And then to the left is our middle child, Cohen. And he insisted on that hat because he's like, I got to be the real me, you know, living that LA thug life as only a pasty white kid can, you know, just trying to live the dream there. And then the one in the middle who looks like Dennis the Menace, that is our youngest, Zeke, and he kind of acts like Dennis the Menace. JR has plenty of stories about him, if you're wondering. But this is our family, and the boys didn't want to have anything to do with this. They were so upset about it. They fought us all morning long. I'm trying to get them on board. We get out there, and we get all set up for the shot. They're pushing and shoving. And, usually with boys, if you don't have boys, it starts with like, and it's all funny. And then someone actually does get hurt. And then it turns into real punching, and it's getting out of hand. And the photographer is actually a woman that goes to our campus. And so we're sort of getting to know her. And she's there taking a photo. I can tell my wife's starting to get embarrassed. And she's like, finally, she's had enough. And she's like, knock it off. She's looking right at the boys. And she's like, we don't do stuff like this, okay? This is not who we are. This is not how we behave. And my kids are kind of smart, Alex, just so you know. And one of them replied back, yes, it is. We do this all the time. This is exactly who we are. And my wife's just like, no, we're not. And she's sort of looking off at the photographer like, no, this is crazy. And then one of my other kids, just to drive the nail in the coffin, was just like, remember that time we were fighting, Mom, and you got so mad at us for being mad at each other that you slammed that door in the kitchen and it broke? And my wife's like, what? No. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, is that how that got broken? Like, because I didn't know. She'd hidden it from me. And they blew it, right? Like my wife, she wants this to be a perfect moment. And not only that, she wants this photographer to like our family and think we're amazing. And our kids just blow our cover. And I don't know how many of you that are parents, like this has happened to you before, where you were trying to portray a certain thing, and then your kids just blew it for you. They showed people how you really are, and that was the part of your life you were trying to hide away. And that is why you had to disown those children, right? Because they're selling you out. You can't have that. I think this happens to a lot of us. And I think what happens in these moments, part of why it's frustrating is, we sometimes in these moments realize that there's this gap between our expectations of our family and somebody else's experiences with our family. And that gap bothers us, right? We have this idea of who we want to be and how we want to come off, and yet that's not really what they're doing. And in those moments, we get frustrated as parents. We're just like, I don't get it. I felt like I did everything right. Okay, like we brainstormed what we wanted to be as a family. We took those worksheets home. We wrote down our values. Okay, we thought about the vision statement, the mission of who we're going to be. And, we came up with an idea. We stenciled it on the wall. Okay, I know you guys can see it. It's right above the fireplace. Okay, why can't you guys just live, laugh, love? Why? It's right there. And if your kids are like my kids, this is the moment where they do start laughing, but it's not with you, it's at you. They're like, this is ridiculous. I don't even know what those things mean. And you as a parent are disheartened. And I think these moments stir up these questions that every good parent has. Like, why don't the good things I want for my family ever seem to stick? I had this dream or vision in my heart, but it doesn't feel like it's happening. Why aren't we becoming who I want us to be? Like, why doesn't my family care about or follow through on the values that I thought we all agreed upon? And if things aren't the way I want them to be, how can I steer them towards something else? And if you've ever had a moment in which that gap between your expectations and your experience of your family has ever felt wide, and you've wondered these things, you're not alone. In fact, we all wonder these things. Parents have wondered these things ever since there were parents. And in fact, there's so many examples of this all throughout Scripture. There's this one incident in the Old Testament that I think particularly highlights this tension that we experience. And it's a story that revolves around the life of this guy named Joshua, he's sort of the father figure, the spiritual father figure of the children of Israel. He takes over after Moses leads the people out of Egypt, and they get out of slavery, and they move on this journey towards the promised land. And as they start moving, and Joshua is leading these people, he has this same realization that we do. He realizes that these people, these kids that he has leadership of, like their lives don't really look like what he had hoped, like the vision that they had set out, that Moses had given them from God. And he feels this frustration. And so he does what a lot of parents do. He gathers everybody up, right? He's like family meeting, and he gives them a dad speech. And this is what he says. I'll read this to you. This is from Joshua chapter 24, verse 2. It says, Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." And then he lists out all this stuff. All these amazing things that God did for these people that they're not really thinking about or appreciative of. And this is how a lot of dad speeches start, right? You're like, you kids don't appreciate your mother and I. I cook, I clean. Cleats aren't free, okay? Do you know how much it costs just to drive to your game that you lost, okay? You felt sad, I felt sad. This is not gonna turn into a scholarship, I know that now, but we're in too deep. Right, we have these sorts of moments. And so he's reminding them of how God has been good. And it says this in verse 14. He finally gets to this point where he says, "Fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. Put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped. Serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord." As it turns out, Joshua's really good at dad speeches, right? And so all these people, they get excited and envisioned. It's the look on their face was the one that you wish your kids would get when you give them a speech, but their eyes just glaze over and they're looking at what popped up on Instagram. And so all these people are leaned in and they're excited and they're like, absolutely. They get all fired up. And so this is the way that they respond. They say this, Joshua chapter 24, verse 16. The people replied, "We would never abandon the Lord and serve other gods. Our God rescued us from slavery. He performed mighty miracles before our very eyes. As we traveled through the wilderness among our enemies, he preserved us. He drove out those living in the land he promised to us. And so we too will serve the Lord, for he alone is our God." And Joshua's like, this is exactly how I wanted this to go. This is turning out perfectly. And the people genuinely meant it. They catch the vision. They understand what he wants them to do, why he wants them to do it. They're on board with it. And things are going great. And then some time goes by. Like literally, if you're reading this in Scripture, the book of Joshua, right afterwards comes the book of Judges. And in the end of the book of Joshua, which is what we're reading right now, they're all like, yeah, let's do it. We're never going to betray God. And then you turn over to the next chapter, and it begins with some time having gone by. And this is what it says. Judges chapter 2, verse 8 says, Joshua died at the age of 110. They buried him in the land that had been allocated. And after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. And the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. Now, this is so fascinating to me. Like if we were watching the movie version of this, there would be a jump cut between these two scenes, right? And we would feel the weight of it, right? It'd start off with the speech and like the music is swelling, you know, the strings and he's given this speech and and he's choked up, and they're leaning in and listening, and then he finishes the speech, and then someone, that you got to have the slow clap, and so one person starts it, and they're like, all excited, and then they're like, we're gonna do it. We're gonna be the best family ever. We're gonna do all the things. We're gonna submit to these values. This is exactly who we're gonna be. And then it would jump cut to 40 years in the future, everyone being like, yeah, we didn't do any of that stuff. Whoops. Actually, to be real with you guys, there's a lot of evil happening right now. What happened? Maybe you wonder, like, how do you go from this, like, excited, passionate, focused moment to just everything falling apart and drifting off course? And the reason I think that's a good question is because I feel like that question is the one that you and I wrestle with inside of our own families. You've had these moments, right, where you had a big vision, you got excited, you had this big, passionate perspective of what you felt like God wanted you to do and who you felt like he wanted you to be, and you were like, we're gonna do it, we're gonna pursue it, we're gonna make it happen. And then it really didn't. Time goes by, and you had one of these moments where you're like, man, I actually don't think my family believes what I thought they did. And when I look at how they do life, they don't behave in the ways that I think they should. What happened? There's this gap between the family that we thought we were in and the family that we find out we are actually in. And it's not just embarrassing because other people are seeing it, it's embarrassing because we're seeing it. And our expectations are being dashed upon the rocks of our experiences. And in the Joshua story, God was really specific with these people about how they were to maintain the value system that he had laid out for his family, the family of God. And in fact, this had been in circulation for a long period of time. It's not that like they didn't read it, they hadn't heard it said, and they weren't aware of it. This is the instructions that they're given about how to follow through on the vision God has for them. This is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. I know some of you are like, I hope we read Deuteronomy today. Oh, you're getting some, okay? Verse 4 says this, listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And some of you are like, I thought Jesus said that. He did. He plagiarized it from Moses, okay? Although technically Moses just said something that God told him and Jesus is God. So it's like a weird inception full circle thing, okay? Super bizarre. Verse 6 says, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're out on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now, this passage, just for context, in Jewish history, this passage is nicknamed the Shema. And it's this Jewish practice of regularly reminding yourself of who God is and who God says you are and what God has called you to do and be. It's sort of the ritual of repeating this thing to yourself and the people in your family over and over and over again so that they will stay the course. And, I would imagine it would be really hard to lose sight of this belief system if it was written and posted and talked about everywhere all the time, which is great. But also, you guys are smart enough to know, just talking about something a lot isn't enough. Eventually, for a value system to really take root, it has to move beyond something that we just say to something that we do, to something that we practice in our everyday lives. The reality is your values are just wishes unless you design disciplines around them that empower you to embody them. And a lot of us, this is the issue in our family that we're like, oh man, I got a vision, I've got values. And in all honesty, because those beliefs haven't translated into active, frequent behaviors, they're just wishes. They're just like, oh man, that'd be nice. I would love that. Oh, well, who knows? Cross our fingers. And God understands this about us too, which is why he didn't just tell them to write it down and talk about it a lot. He takes it a step further. God gives them a series of rituals to repeat, these feasts and festivals and sacred days and sacrifices and seasons of fasting and collective prayers. All these things found in the rest of Deuteronomy and Leviticus and Numbers. And today I want us just to read the book of Leviticus together. Leviticus chapter 1. No, I'm just kidding. You're like, why did I bring a friend today? This is going to be horrible. But all these things were things that the people were doing when Joshua was sort of fathering the people. They're things that originated through God with Moses, and it's what kept the values of their family front and center. Now, did they feel like doing these things all the time? Probably not. But they did them anyway because they understood what these regular practices would instill in them and their children long term. Because the reality of it is, if your beliefs aren't regularly reflected in your behavior, you won't believe them for long. And the reason for this is because we gather clues about who we are and what we value from what we observe ourselves doing. Not just what we think, not just what we say, but what we see ourselves do. Right? If you make this pact with yourself, you're like, I'm going to be a runner, and you've never run in your life, except on the playground when you were a kid, but that was like 40 years ago. And now you're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a runner. And everyone's like, good luck. You're probably not. And you go out and you run, or like if you're like me, you just sort of fast walk limping, you know what I mean? Grabbing the stitch in your side, panting heavily and cursing the skies. That's the way I do it, okay? And after a while of doing this thing, you get a little bit better, you progress a little bit, but you don't give up. And because you're doing it over and over and over again, this is the way your brain works, is that your brain eventually is like, we must be a runner because I see us running all the time. What else would we be? And it works the other way too. If we tell ourselves we're something, but we never observe ourselves doing it, we don't believe ourselves. We begin to think that, wait, why am I lying to me? And over time, as Joshua's people abandoned their rituals, their belief system eroded. And in a single generation, they lost complete sight of who God is and the way God invited them to live. And they didn't set out to do this. It just happened. It happened to them, I think, the way that these things happen to all of us, where we set out to do something, and then over time, it just sort of goes away. We excuse it, we make exceptions, and then we rationalize and compromise our rituals into the distance. And these people realize that not only are they not doing good, but they are actively doing evil, and they didn't even notice crossing that threshold. Because nobody sits down one day and is just like, all right, this is the way it's going to be from here on out with this family. You know what we're not about anymore? God and Jesus, okay? We hate them. We're not going to church. We're not doing any of this stuff. We don't believe it anymore. But just slowly over time, the connection and the practices erode. Like these people, I'm sure that they thought to themselves like, okay, yes, we're aware of the Deuteronomy verse. Do we really have to write it everywhere? I mean, that's a lot of writing. It's just like, it's starting to get, can we do other decorating ideas? I don't even like that font. You know what I mean? It's frustrating to me. Papyrus? Seriously? Just trying to find out where the designers were in the room. See who was most annoyed. Like, do we really need to talk about it that much? Like, do we really need to do that thing every single week? And so they sort of loosen up, and before long, it's barely written anywhere. It's barely ever talked about. Seldom do they do that. And over time, the vision and values so central to who they wanted to be end up dissolving into nothing more than an irrelevant tradition that we have no connection to, interest in, or understanding of. And isn't this what happened to a lot of us during the pandemic? I bump into people all the time, at the store or doing different things out and about, and they always start apologizing to me. It's weird being a pastor Because people, I can see it in their eyes. They're like, uh-oh, he knows. Meanwhile, I don't know. And they'll come up to me and they're like, hey, Pastor, I'm so sorry. I haven't been to church for a while. And I was like, well, good, because you're going to hell. I noticed and told God for it. I feel like that's what they're afraid is going to happen. I would never do that. JR would, but I would never do that to anyone. Because I don't think like that. I don't believe that way. And when I get talking to them, like they've stopped coming for a while and, they didn't mean to. They got out of habit. But here's the reality with any habit in your life. Being out of practice changes our priorities with anything in life. And after a while, it stops being important because we haven't practiced it into importance. And unfortunately, with a lot of people that I bump into who have let sort of their relationship with God or their rituals around God go, the benefits their abandoned ritual was providing also slip through the cracks as well. And they wonder, like, why do my kids seem so, like, self-centered ever since this moment? Like, why is it that I don't really think about or prioritize God as much as I used to? And I wonder if it has something to do with a practice you let go of. One ancient proverb says it this way. You probably heard this before. Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, the first thing you need to know is that Proverbs aren't promises, they're probabilities, okay? And a probability essentially says, most people who do this get this result. Like, it's not a guarantee, but it's likely, statistically speaking, okay? That's what it's saying. Like, literally, these ancient writers are sort of saying, like, all the research that we've encountered thus far points to this typically being true. And what this wisdom writer tells us is that the values in our life, we pick them up and we internalize them as a result of training, not telling. Not just trying, not just hoping or praying or crossing our fingers, training. And that means building schedules and practices and rituals around the things we say are important and then repeating them regularly, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. This is telling us that, what you do with your family teaches them what's important to your family. Because experiences are more powerful than explanations. Like, our kids and our family surrounding us end up picking up on and elevating to importance the things that they see us do, not the things that we say. My version of this verse of train your kids, don't just tell them. My version would be, don't be a fat coach. Because we've all had them. There's a season in your life, right? Junior high, high school, you had like a fat running coach, and you're like, I don't get it. He's over there yelling at us, saying that we're not trying hard, eating a donut, chubby, you know what I mean? Riding a golf cart, yelling at us through a megaphone. You have no right to talk to me. You don't do this stuff. Wearing a sweatsuit you never once sweat in. It's hypocritical. This is sometimes the way I think our kids feel about us, saying like, do what I say, not what I do. Telling doesn't work like training. And eventually people tune us out. This is why the Apostle Paul, when he's talking to one of the very first Christian churches and trying to sort of father them along spiritually, he says this, Philippians chapter 4, verse 9, keep putting into practice all you learned from me, everything you heard from me and saw me do. This is so interesting to me, this idea of practice. He's like, practice. If you guys want to go the distance, if you want to embody the values that we talked about, if you want to become Jesus people, if you want to live life to the full, don't just think about the things that I told you. Do the things you watched me do. All those things that we talked about when we were like sort of walking through daily life, the things that you witnessed me do, the things that I trained you doing while I did them alongside of you, practice those things. Keep doing it because that training will determine who you become and what you value. In other words, the most effective way to teach and train isn't lecturing, threatening, and instilling fear, but envisioning, encouraging, and practicing alongside of over and over and over again. That's what it means to train up. Or the way we might say it in the modern world is like, that's what it means to mentor somebody, to bring someone up and pull them along. And what is so crazy to me about these New Testament and Old Testament verses that are telling us, make training a priority, do it this way, that all of the research that these ancient authors are gathering and making suggestions to us about, like modern researchers are coming up with the same exact suggestions. Modern researchers are telling us now that teachers, coaches, and parents that get the best results from kids are high standard, high support. So what does that mean? It means that they are people who push kids to be their best, to pursue things that really matter with all they are, but they don't abandon them to do it alone. They run alongside them. They champion them. They train with them. Now, some of us were like, that sounds great, but that's maybe not the environment that we're familiar with. Some of us have seen like parenting, a parenting technique that looks more like, low standard, high support, right? So it's like, I have no expectations of you, but here is everything, right? And so it's like, you can do it, sweetie. Everyone gets a trophy. You mess up, don't worry. There are no such thing as mess ups because just do whatever you want. Of course I'll refill your Amex card. You know what I mean? It's like this sort of thing. And this is not my opinion. Like, just research is telling us that like the low standard, high support creates a certain type of person. It creates people as they grow and mature who are entitled, who feel like they deserve everything, and who have a major disconnection between how hard they're actually going to have to work in order to achieve their goals and their dreams. Because it should be given to them. I don't have to meet any standards because there shouldn't be any standards. I'm awesome. Some of us, we don't relate to that because we grew up in the opposite. We grew up with high standards, low support. Or it was just like, this is what you're going to do or else. And or else was never a fun option. It was never great. And these sorts of demands where there's no support given through the process of trying to reach those standards creates a certain type of person. It often creates sort of family systems in which it's hierarchical and it creates, kids or people even as they grow up and mature who are militaristic, who are rigid and riddled with insecurity, and who oftentimes will rebel against whatever their parents were doing or told them to do just because they feel like they can never, ever live up. I can't do what you want me to do anyway, so I might as well just do whatever I want to do. And most of us drift towards one or the other. Like most of us tend to be like great at like high standards, and some of us sort of tend to be more like high support. And whichever one you are is probably the one that like somebody nudged you during. You're like, oh, that's not like you. And, hopefully you married somebody or raising your kids with somebody who's like the opposite. That's the best, because you're just like, oh, we did it. Maybe this thing's going to work out. Don't die. Or else these kids are screwed. We got to have the balance. We all know the part I'm not good at. Like, our families need this from us. And I think most of us tend to want to give our kids whatever it was we felt like we didn't get when we were kids. And that's good, as long as you also give them what you got. Because what happens a lot of times in family systems is that, like, we got this and not this, and so we're like, I'm going to give them all of this, and then we give them none of that. And then our kids grow up and they're like, I wish I would have gotten some of that, and they swing it back over here. And someone has to actually bring balance. Not by lowering the standard, not by lowering the support, but pushing both as high as they possibly can. Like, how would you do that? I think setting a high standard looks like, this is what I expect from you and why. And supplying a high support looks like, what do you need from me to do what I expect of you? We need both things. And part of the reason why it's important to have these conversations with our family, with our spouse, with our kids, with our in-laws, is because like what we need and expect and the standards we're pursuing need to be clear. But also, people experience support in different sorts of ways. Have you noticed this? That what is motivating to one person is actually discouraging to another person? My kids are completely different people. My middle son, can be kind of stubborn, we were having a family meeting and he's like, Dad, I was like, what can I do to help you guys? Like they have these goals that they're trying to do. And he's like, wants to beef up a little bit because he's kind of scrawny. He's got like his mom's side body type, and our youngest son has, unfortunately, my body type. And I've apologized to him many times about that. But like he wants to get beefier, right? Because he's plays sports and stuff like that. And so he's got to get up and work out in the mornings. And he's like, I actually like it when you come in and you like shake me awake and you're like, come on, let's go. If you care about your goals, let's go. And it's kind of a little bit rough. It's not typically my personality, but he responds really well to it. He's like, I like that. I'm like, that's interesting because you always fight me. So it's confusing. I don't know if you can see how I would be confused. You tell me the opposite of what you really want. My daughter, if I did that, it would crush her spirit. She's a different person. Like I have to be like, hey, babe, this person is going to be here and you don't want to let them down. She's like, okay. She's so socially conscious and socially oriented, right? Which is why it's important to know what that person needs to feel supported towards that standard. But it's tough because setting high standards requires us to care more about who that person will be in the future than how they feel in the present. Because it's tough to have a standard set and realize like, no one's usually like, thank you for letting me know I don't quite measure up yet. It's usually like, oh, wow, that's a challenge. But I think the reverse is true too. Supplying high support requires us to care more about how someone will be in the future than how we feel in the present. Because sometimes we don't always feel like supporting. It's sort of like saying like, I know you don't want to do this, but you need to, and here's why. Come on, let's go. And also, I'll be real with you. I don't want to help you do this right now. But I'm going to, and here's why. And I believe that if both of us run after this and commit to this and follow through on this, we'll both be grateful in the future because keeping these practices keep us on course to become our best selves. In other words, the best way to embody your values is to implement regular rhythms and routines to reinforce them. Another way to say the same thing might be our priorities are revealed by our scheduled practices more than our stated passions. And this is what Moses and Joshua knew that the generation after them failed to. You can't just talk about it. You've got to train your way into it. So when it comes to you, I want to just give you some questions to help you contextualize maybe how to do this in your story, in your family. And you may want to just take a picture of it, but I'll read through them for you guys because you'll want to maybe go through these later. Do you make values-based decisions as a family and voice the reason behind them? Or do you just sort of do in the moment whatever you feel like in the moment? Or is there some sort of bigger filter that you're pushing decisions through? Is what you say you value present in your weekly schedule? Well, not really. That is most important. We did it, I'll be honest, we did it last year one time, but that's what we care about. Is there anything on your schedule that reinforces the opposite of your values? Does everyone in your family know what you're trying to be and do together and why? Or if you asked what's our family about? Would they tell you something totally different? And you're like, that might be part of the issue. When you see someone acting in alignment with your values, do you stop and celebrate them so everybody knows this is a big deal, this is who we want to be? And how often do you revisit your schedule as a family to see if you veered off course? I had a boss who used to say, You get what you inspect, not what you expect. And what he meant by that was, you can't just sort of cast a vision once and walk away and expect that everything is just going to move in that direction forever without any reinforcement or reminders or clarifications or adjustments. And here's the thing, just because something is good for your family doesn't mean that they're gonna wanna do it. Guess what? They don't have to. They don't have to want to. They're gonna fight you on certain things. You know why? They're children. That's why you're in charge, not them. Listen to this. This is the author of Hebrews is talking about this idea of trying to bring people along to what they value most. Hebrews 12, verse 11. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. I love that the author puts an exclamation, he's yelling this, right? Do I want to do the stuff that's good for me and my family? No. I hate it. It's painful. But afterwards, there'll be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak will not fail but become strong. In other words, what this author is saying is the reason your family may not believe and behave the things that you would hope for them may just be because they need more practice. So make it a priority. Put it on the schedule. Allow your requirements to sometimes be uncomfortable. In order to actually take people where they need to go, not just where they want to go, sometimes they're not going to like every step of the way. And sometimes our argument is like, but if I make them do it now, they'll hate it later. And can we just all agree to stop using this really horrible excuse? Because it's not really true. Not in the way that we mean it. Like, I insisted that my kids all be potty trained and none of them hate restrooms. It's weird. As they've grown older, it's really bizarre. Like, I've insisted, like, since they were 3 years old, like, you can't go outside naked, and none of them hate clothing. It's crazy, huh? Safeguard your values. Some things are worth insisting on because they're that valuable. And what I think is true is that kids don't hate helpful habits, they hate hypocrisy. And that's why it's so important that we train instead of tell. I think a lot of us that got burnt out on faith or certain value systems when we were younger, it's because we were told one thing and we watched the lives of people who did another. And we're like, I don't want any part of that. This is the power of training. I think the ultimate goal would to get your family to a place where when people ask them, like, why do you guys always go there? Or why do you do this? Or why do you prioritize this thing? Their most natural response is like, we always do that. That's just what we do. Because it reminds us of what's important. And I gotta tell you, no matter where you fall in your family, the things you do together become your traditions. So you better be deliberate about those things. Will your family's memories about what you did to bond together be based around deep-seated values or just throwaway activities? Here's the big question. Is the schedule you keep likely to produce the traits you say you value? Is the schedule you keep likely to produce the traits you say you value? Because if those beliefs don't find their way into your every week behavior, it's just a matter of time before you don't believe them. How you train is who you become. And that's my prayer for you today. That as you take the vision that God is giving you for your family, that you put it into practice, that you tuck it into your schedule, that you make it a priority, that you take a stand on the things that matter in your family. And And even though it's not enjoyable every single time, every single moment, you realize the compound effect is taking you somewhere and making you into someone you'll be proud of being. But you're gonna need God's help. And that's what I wanna pray into your life today. Would you bow your heads across this room? God, I am so grateful for the life that you have given each of us. And I'm grateful that you don't just give us life, but you show us the best way to live. That through your word, you guide us into being the people that you have made us to be, to live our lives to the full, to maximize our relationships, to get to the end of the race that we're running and feel like we did it well. And God, I pray that you would envision us with the sort of family that you want us to build and be a part of, and that we wouldn't wait for somebody else to do it. But God, we would take those things that we have a heart for and we plug them into our schedule, that we would plug them into the way we do life, that we would insist upon the things that matter. And God, all of our practicing and training would craft us into the kinds of people you have always meant for us to be. God, may we have the opposite experience of this generation after Joshua. May we look back over our lives and may we have a sense of gratitude that we fought the good fight, that we prioritized what was most important, that we insisted upon things that built character, and that we trained our family to be people who look and love like Jesus. We ask this in your name. And everybody said,